Welcome back to 15-Minute Discourse, where we like to take really complicated subjects and try to break them down into something that you can at least get a good starting point of understanding with us. And today we're going to be talking about explainable AI, which sounds very futuristic, and it kind of is, but it's something that we all need to understand a little bit better because it's impacting our lives a lot more than I think a lot of people realize.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people are very curious about AI in general. It's one of those things that we hear about all the time, but most people don't really know how it works. And this is particularly true when we talk about things like machine learning and deep learning, which is where the explainability becomes really important.
It's like we're happy to accept the output of the machine, if it's giving us, good search results or recommending movies that we like, we're okay with it. But then when it starts doing things like making decisions about healthcare or finance or security, that's when people start getting afraid.
Exactly. And I think there's this inherent lack of trust with AI because we don't understand it. So that's really the mission of today's deep dives, is to understand explainable AI or XAI.
Exactly. We've got a ton of research, as always. We've got articles, we've got studies, we've even got some policy briefs that we're going to be diving into. And we want to try to answer some really important questions.
Yeah.
Why is XAI so essential right now?
Right.
What are the different approaches to achieving explainability?
Right.
And what are some of the benefits and challenges that come along with it?
Because there are challenges.
There are always challenges.
Yeah.
So to really kick things off, let's start with the why. Why is there this sudden need for XAI?
Well, the need is because the models themselves are very opaque. They work very well, but we don't know how they're working. And that's particularly true with these deep learning models.
Yeah. It's kind of like a magic trick. You see the amazing outcome,
Absolutely.
but you have no idea how the magician pulled it off. And that can be pretty unsettling when it's something that's directly impacting your life.
Especially when it's like, whether you're approved for a loan or what medical diagnosis you're given.
Yeah.
You need to know why.
Or, what if a self-driving car suddenly slams on the brakes? I mean, you really want to know, why did it do that? Was it the right decision? Was it a mistake? So these are the kind of things that XAI is trying to unpack.
And I think the core question that XAI is trying to answer is, how can we trust a system if we don't know how it's reasoning?
Exactly.
If you're denied a loan and you have no idea why, well, how do you know that it wasn't biased against you?
Yeah. And we actually came across a really interesting example in our research about this.
Oh, really?
It was an AI system that was being used in manufacturing to identify defective products.
Yeah. Sure.
So this AI is looking at products coming down the assembly line, and it's saying, hey, this one's defective. This one's good. This one's defective.
Right.
But it wasn't explaining why. So the workers were like, I don't know if I can trust this.
Right.
I don't know if I should scrap this product. I don't know why the AI thinks it's defective. And that's really where XAI comes in. It's about bridging the gap between, AI's capabilities and human understanding. It's about making AI accountable.
Yep.
And ultimately more trustworthy.
When we're talking about explainability, there's this distinction between local explanations, global explanations.
And that's something I've always struggled with a little bit, so maybe you can clarify that.
Sure. So think of it like this. A local explanation is when you're explaining a single prediction. So let's say you have an AI and it identifies a cat in an image. The local explanation would be what features of that image led the AI to say cat.
Okay.
So it might point to the ears, might say whiskers, things like that. That's a local explanation.
So the AI is essentially saying, okay, because this picture has ears and whiskers, I think it's a cat.
Yep.
Okay, and so then what's a global explanation?
So a global explanation is about explaining the whole model. So it's not just about...
So not just one specific decision?
No. It's not one specific decision.
Okay.
It's saying, overall, how does this model behave?
Got it.
Okay, so let's say you're looking at a credit scoring model. A global explanation might say things like income and credit history are the most important features.
Okay.
So it's not telling you why you approved or denied for a loan. It's saying overall.
It's saying this is how the model generally works. Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Good.
So we've got these two types of explanations, but how do we actually generate them?
Right.
I mean, is there like a magic XAI button?
I wish there was a magic XAI button, but unfortunately, It's not that simple.
Okay.
There are a number of different techniques that people are using, and they all have their own pros and
So it's not like
cons.
a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
No, not at all. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve.
Okay.
So, for example, you mentioned Lime earlier. Lime is a technique that's really good for local explanations. What it does is it basically builds a simplified model around a specific prediction.
So it's like a miniature version of the big complex model.
It is.
Okay.
And that simplified model is something that we can understand.
Got it.
So we can look at that and say, okay, I see why this prediction was made.
That's pretty clever.
Then you have things like SHP.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
SHIP is really interesting because it uses game theory to explain predictions. So it basically assigns points to each feature
Okay.
to show how much that feature contributed.
So it's kind of like, in a basketball game, each player has their points. You can see who contributed the most to the win.
That's a great analogy.
Okay, so we've got these techniques like Lime and SHP.
Right.
Are there any others that we should be aware of?
Oh, yeah, there are a ton. Another really popular one is called saliency maps.
Okay, I've seen those. They're kind of like heat maps, right?
Exactly. They're heat maps that show you which parts of an image an
Yeah.
AI is focusing on.
So if the AI is looking at a picture of a cat, it might highlight the cat's eyes or the whiskers and say, this is what I'm looking at to make my decision.
And then there are those counterfactual explanations, kind of like what-if scenarios, right?
They are.
Like, what if I had done this differently? Would the AI have made a different decision?
Exactly. So let's say your loan application is denied. A counterfactual explanation might say, if you had increased your credit score by 50 points, you would have been approved.
Oh, that's really helpful.
It gives you a path.
It gives you some agency.
Exactly. It shows you what you can do to change the outcome.
So instead of just saying, no, you're not approved,
Right.
it's saying, no, you're not approved, but here's why.
And here's what you can do to change that.
That's pretty cool.
And then, of course, you have the more traditional models, like decision trees and rule-based systems.
Right. Those are a little bit easier to understand, right?
They are, because they're very explicit. You can see the rules.
Yeah. You can see the decision path.
Right.
It's very clear how they work.
But I guess the trade-off there is that they might not be as accurate.
That's the classic trade-off
Yeah.
between accuracy and explainability.
Right. Do you want a model that's really accurate, but you don't understand how it works? Or do you want a model that's less accurate, but you can see exactly what it's doing?
And it really depends on the application. It's something high stakes like healthcare. You might sacrifice a little bit of accuracy for the transparency.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But if it's something like recommending movies,
Yeah, then maybe accuracy is more important.
you might be okay with a little bit of a black box.
Okay, so we've got this trade-off to consider, but it seems like XAI is really pushing the boundaries of AI transparency.
It is. It's a very active area of research. People are coming up with new techniques all the time.
That's exciting. But at the end of the day, explainability isn't just a technical challenge.
Yeah.
It's also a human challenge.
Absolutely.
It's about communication.
It is.
It's about understanding how people think
Right.
and how they interpret information.
And we have to be careful because we don't want to oversimplify things to the point where the explanations are actually misleading.
Right. It's like that's saying, a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we need to find that sweet spot between accuracy, explainability, and human understanding.
Absolutely.
That's a lot to juggle, but I think we're up for the
I
challenge.
think so too. So we've talked about, what XAI is and why it's important. Now let's dive into some of the benefits of actually pursuing this kind of transparency in AI.
I think the biggest one that comes to mind is trust, right?
Absolutely.
If we can understand how an AI system is making its decisions, we're much more likely to trust those decisions.
It's not just about trust, though.
Okay.
It's also about collaboration.
Oh, interesting.
When humans can understand the reasoning behind an AI's decisions, they can actually provide better feedback.
Okay, so it's not just about blindly accepting the AI's output.
No, not at all.
It's about working with it
Exactly.
to make sure that it's making the right decisions.
And a human might be able to spot an error
Right.
that the AI miss.
Or even see a bias that the AI might be perpetuating.
Yeah, bias is a huge issue with AI because AI systems are trained on data, and that data can reflect existing biases in society.
And if we don't understand how the AI is using that data,
Right.
we might not even realize that it's biased.
And that's where XAI can really help
Yeah.
by shedding light on the AI's decision-making process.
It's like shining a spotlight
Exactly.
on those hidden biases
So we can identify them.
and then hopefully do something about it. And then there's the whole regulatory and ethical side of things.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
As AI becomes more powerful, there's a growing need to make sure that it's being used responsibly. And XAI can play a key role in that by providing that transparency and accountability. Okay, so it sounds like XAI has a lot of potential benefits, but I'm sure there's some challenges as well.
Oh, of course.
Nothing's ever perfect. So what are some of the things that we need to be aware of?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is that trade-off between accuracy and explainability.
Right, we talked about that earlier.
We did.
Sometimes the most accurate models are the ones that are the hardest to explain.
It's like trying to explain quantum physics. Because someone who's never taken a science class,
Right.
it's very difficult to wrap your head around.
And so how do we deal with that trade-off?
Well, that's where the research comes in. People are working on developing new techniques that can provide more explainability
Right.
without sacrificing too much accuracy.
So it's like finding that balance.
Exactly. Finding that sweet spot.
Right.
And then there's the challenge of oversimplification.
We talked about that as well.
Yeah, we want to make AI understandable, but we don't want to dumb it down.
To the point where it's misleading.
Exactly, because that can actually be more harmful than helpful.
So it's a delicate balancing act.
It is. And it's important to remember that AI is constantly evolving.
So XAI needs to evolve as well.
Yeah, we can't just develop XAI techniques.
And then just assume that they're going to work forever.
No, we have to constantly be updating them as AI itself changes.
Because the goalposts are constantly moving. So even though XAI has all these potential benefits, it's not a silver bullet.
No.
It's an ongoing process. And it's
so-
something that we need to be constantly working on.
Absolutely.
But I think it's a worthwhile endeavor
I do too.
because the stakes are so high.
They are.
AI is becoming more and more integrated into our lives. And we need to make sure that we
Yeah.
understand it and that we
Right.
can trust it.
Exactly.
All right, so we've talked about the benefits and challenges of XAI. Now let's move on to some real-world applications.
That sounds great.
So we've talked about the what and the why of explainable AI. Now let's get into the where is XAI actually being used?
Yes, let's look at some real-world applications.
Because it's one thing to talk about it in theory, but it's another thing to see it in action.
Absolutely. And one of the most promising areas of care.
Okay, healthcare. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, AI is being used more and more to diagnose diseases
Can analyze medical images.
and to recommend treatments.
But if a doctor is going to trust an AI's diagnosis, they need to understand how the AI arrived at that diagnosis.
They need to know what the AI is seeing that they might be missing.
And that's where XAI comes in.
Exactly. XAI can provide that explanation.
It can say, okay, I think this is a tumor because I'm seeing these specific patterns in this scan.
And that gives the doctor the confidence to either agree with the AI, question it,
Yeah.
and maybe order additional tests.
So it's really about augmenting the doctor's expertise
It's not about replacing doctors.
Right.
It's about giving them another tool.
that they can use to make better decisions.
Exactly.
Okay, so healthcare is a big one. What are some other areas where XAI is making an impact?
Well, finance is another big one.
Finance,
Yeah, AI is being used a lot in finance.
right, for things like credit scoring.
For credit scoring, loan approvals,
Mhm.
fraud detection, all kinds of stuff. And these are all areas where explainability is really important.
Because the decisions that AI is making in finance can have a huge impact on people's lives.
They can affect whether you can buy a house,
Right.
whether you can get a loan.
Whether you can even get a job.
Absolutely.
So if an AI system is denying you a loan, you want to know why.
You have a right to know why.
Exactly, and XAI can provide that explanation.
It can say, okay, your loan was denied because your debt-to-income ratio is too high.
Or your credit score is too low.
Exactly. And that gives you the information you need to either try to improve your situation.
Or shop around for a different loan.
Exactly. It gives you some agency
Right.
in the process.
Okay, so healthcare finance. Those are two big areas where XAI is being used. Are there any other notable examples? I mean, XAI is being used in manufacturing to identify defects in product. It's being used in security to detect threats.
So it's really making its way into all sorts of different industries.
It is because AI itself is being used in
Yeah.
all sorts of different industries.
And wherever AI goes, XAI needs to follow.
Absolutely. We need to be able to understand and trust the decision.
That these
Sure.
AI systems are making.
That's the key.
All right, well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of explainable AI.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the basic concepts, technical challenges,
To the ethical considerations.
to the real-world applications.
And it's clear that XAI is a rapidly evolving field.
It is, and it's one that's only going to become more important
Right.
in the years to come.
As AI becomes more powerful and more pervasive,
We need to make sure that we're keeping up with the
Ah,
explainability.
because at the end of the day,
It's about making sure that AI is used for good.
for the benefit of humanity, not for something that we all end up regretting. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. If you enjoyed this deep dive into explainable AI, be sure to like and subscribe to 15-Minute Discourse.
And tell your friends,
We're here every week breaking down complex topics.
making them easy to understand.
So until next time, keep those minds curious.
And stay informed.